This is Fothentic History.
Hey, welcome to this new episode of Fothentic History. I'm Holly Fry.
And I'm Brian Young.
You're giggly today, apparently. Which makes both
I am
of us.
a little bit.
I'm excited because we're talking about a piece of history that I am especially fond of.
And I'm giggly to even out how horrifying and terrible it is.
Yeah. That's a good plan. We'll get a little emotional balance for everyone. We should start off at the top of this episode by discussing some semantics, I think. Don't you agree?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about Alderaan, and I pronounce it Alderaan, but some people out there pronounce it Alderaan.
Yeah,
and,
not me.
But I just wanted everybody to know we're going to be sticking with the Alderaan pronunciation, and if you prefer Alderaan, see, it's even hard for me to say.
Me
if
too.
you prefer Alderaan, then you have our apologies.
Yeah, you just mentally do it in your head whenever it comes up, which is going to be a lot, so brace. Today we're actually going to talk about the lost culture of Alderaan. So when the entire planet of Alderaan was brutally destroyed in one fast and cold move at the order of Grand Moff Will Tarkin, the massive loss of life was, of course, a tragedy in and of itself. But in addition to those lives that were snuffed out, it's also important to remember that an entire vital culture was destroyed. So generations of arts and sciences and philosophy and civics and ideology were all completely gone instantly. That's the archives and the museums of an entire world lost all at once.
It's common for most people to view such events, particularly those that happened a while ago, with like a detachment. But consider just for a moment what it would be like if the same thing happened to your home planet. Every restaurant you loved, all your favorite museums and galleries, every monument, every protected natural space, every person you know that was there and wasn't off planet, gone. That's a really heavy, sobering thought.
It is, and as you said, it's one of those things that we kind of get distance on, and we could say, oh yeah, Tarkin destroyed Alderaan, but man, that's a whole lot, and it gives me certainly pause. So in an effort to honor and remember that which has been lost, we're going to talk a bit about the many things that were unique to the lost planet of Alderaan and its people.
So to start, we're going to talk about the geography and the wildlife, etc. Alderaan was a core world located in the star system of the same name. It was covered with massive bodies of water in addition to a terrain that was largely mountainous, but also included green hilly areas. There was also the proper climate for a rainforest known as Isathabith rainforest. Am I getting that pronunciation right, Holly?
I'm not sure. It might be Isathabith. I'm not positive.
Well, that's another one for the pedants out there.
There you go.
So there was this rainforest in one area of the globe. Another famed natural feature of the planet was cloud-shaped falls, which was once likened by prominent Alderaanian Princess Leia to a cloud that had nested on a river.
I'm going to pause for just a moment and point out that when you say Alderaanian, it's different, whereas I would say Alderaanian. Neither is right, I think. It's just interesting to note that it shifts your vowel pronunciation.
It's weird. It's weird. I don't know. There's no hard and fast rule. I mean, this is one of those things that's probably lost too, is the idea, like, how many Alderaanian scholars are there to tell us about the semantics and pronunciations of the words?
Right. Not nearly enough. And much of the knowledge of Alderaan's wildlife has unfortunately been lost, but we do have a little bit of information about two native species. One was a bird that was predominantly white. Its wings in particular were white. And this species actually had this fascinating migration pattern where it would migrate around the planet on a 1-year cycle, kind of doing a continuous loop around the globe. And their passage overhead as they flew in this sort of X formation was such a consistent marker that it was used by citizens to identify the arrival of new seasons.
The other native wildlife was the Alderaanian wolf cat. And while we know very little about them, It's believed that they were large, feral, and dangerous creatures. I really like the sound of a wolf cat. I like wolves. I like cats. Alderaan seems like a place for me to go to explore nature.
So I'm guessing that you fancy yourself something of a Svengali and you think you would tame one and make it your friend, but I don't think that came with really high possibility.
No, I just want to see one in a zoo or something.
There you go. Maybe from afar in its natural habitat.
With macro binoculars.
There you go. And to the people of Alderaan, there was nothing prized so highly as pacifism. The world's policy was that everyone was entitled to a full, free education, and many citizens volunteered their time teaching whatever special skills they possessed to others.
I think this is one of those reasons why all those hollows of Alderaan, that it all looks so beautiful is that right there. Like, they were all just so learned in coming up with how beautiful everything was.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that coming up.
I can't wait. One of the primary tenets of Alderaan's culture was helping others, as evidenced in our mention of educational volunteerism. And this was a society largely void of selfishness, and yet it prospered. A good example and lesson against greed as a virtue. It seems that the people of the planet understood at a fundamental level that no one individual could achieve what the cooperation of a group could.
Yeah, it's sort of a beautiful idea. It's hard to imagine just because we do not live in a world where that's really the common approach, but clearly it worked very well for them. And now we're going to move on to sort of how that manifested by talking a little bit about their arts and culture. So in terms of cultural contributions, Alderaan set a really high bar. Everything that was designed and made there was created with care and the utmost craftsmanship.
I like how the first thing we're diving into is beverages. The planet produced two particular beverages that it became known for. The first was emerald wine, and the second was tonaré. Emerald wine was made from emerald grapes that flourished on the planet thanks to a hospitable climate. And we should point out that Alderaan was not the only planet that produced this particular beverage, though. It was also made on Lothal and Naboo. True viticulturists could likely easily discern the differences in each planet's offerings of emerald wine, so though it was not the singular producer, the loss of Alderaan was still a loss in the wine world, as its unique version could never be made again. As a side note, the Royal House of Organa owned a ranch on Alderaan that grew emerald grapes for producing wine.
Yeah, I mean, it's a unique beverage. I do like, as you pointed out, how we're going to talk about culture and we go straight to alcohol, but tonaré, however, was a wine that was completely unique to Alderaan. This was made nowhere else in the galaxy, and it was teal in color, and normally it was served cold. And since no other planet made tonaré, once Alderaan was gone, bottles of it became incredibly valuable, and possessing this rare drink had this level of prestige that came with it. It sort of became a shorthand indicator of great wealth and taste. So if you were a person and you were trying to impress someone, you could whip out your bottle of tonaré, and everyone would know this person is loaded.
And then, now that we've gotten the important part of their culture out of the way, now we can move to architecture. Architecturally, Alderaan was incredibly sophisticated. The entire aesthetic of each building's design was in line with nature. The cities of the planet were carefully designed to harmoniously mesh with and enhance the natural landscape. Many of their elegantly designed buildings were constructed from a white mineral called synthstone, which blended beautifully with the snowy peaks on the planet.
And while all of Alderaan's architecture was unfortunately obliterated, the good news is that the style of it lived on. Synthstone structures influenced by the designs of those on the Lost Planet could be found in other places throughout the galaxy, including Lothal, Garel, and Bespin's Cloud City.
Alderaan's fashion, it's probably no surprise, was similarly elegant in terms of more formal robes and dresses. Long, fluid lines of drapings that fell from wide pleats were a common design element. Rich fabrics with unique texture and luster were favored choices.
But even in more casual clothing, long, elegant lines were seen in all garments. In some cases, casual clothes were very similar to more formal apparel, but they were just made with less luxurious fabrics and with alterations to length and volume for practicality. So the robes were not made with quite as much yardage so people could move around more easily. And even the most utilitarian pieces really evidence the cohesive aesthetic of all of Alderaan's creative arts. So they still, even if you just had like an outfit for actual action activities, it was still all based on like a long, elegant lines and like these beautiful curves. It was really, really lovely.
No matter the style of clothing, one of the defining characteristics of the design of Alderaanian attire was a careful balance between the curved and straight design lines, which served to enhance the wearer's form in much the same way the planet's architecture complemented its surroundings. Clothing was never at odds with the human body, but always in harmony with it.
And musically, Alderaan was, through sheer good fortune, able to maintain a little bit of a legacy even after the planet was gone through the cloistered musical group called Melodic Order. And though the performers in this band had taken a vow to interact only with others from their home planet to avoid the dilution of their music, they weren't on Alderaan when the Empire struck. They were instead on Naboo, performing via hologram in accordance with their vow, like they literally would not even perform directly in front of an audience. But they were at their regular gig at a club called Dija.
It's an interesting ethical idea, like when your entire planet and culture goes, is there a responsibility on your part to maintain that in the best way possible and only cohabitate with those from that planet? It's a really interesting idea. Obviously, they were taking it one step further artistically to do that before the planet was gone.
Right.
But it's interesting to think about.
Well, and it's one of those things, right? Like, one, that could certainly be argued from many angles, like just in terms of like being a creative person, should you stay kind of in your purposefully developed tunnel vision and not experience other artists, which could inform your music, but could also grow it in a really interesting way.
Well, I mean, could you imagine them mixing their sound with jizz wailing?
Sure.
That would be...
I like a mashup of all kinds. But then there's also the other thing to consider, that like no artist kind of goes into that their chosen profession, whatever form of arts it is, thinking, gosh, if the planet's destroyed, I'm going to be all that's left to carry this on. Like, so that's a lot. It's kind of a heady concept to think of, on top of already being in this cloister situation.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. So moving on to politics and notable Alderaanians. Despite being a peaceful world, Alderaan was central to the galactic conflicts that were at the heart of the Republic's end. The planet's political history goes back to the beginning of the Galactic Republic. It was one of the first worlds to be part of the democratic government, and thus was well respected.
As evidence of the admiration that was held for Alderaan and its political figures, when the trade dispute on Naboo led to the ousting of the Galactic Senate's Chancellor Valorum by a vote of no confidence on the part of the Senate, Alderaan's Senator Bail Antilles was one of the few leaders nominated to replace him.
While Antilles ultimately lost the position to Senator Sheev Palpatine of Naboo, it's hard not to wonder how things would have played out had he been raised to the position of Chancellor. Given his home planet's esteem for peace and cooperation, it seems as though, and again we're just speculating here, there may have been a chance that the Clone Wars could have been avoided had the vote for Chancellor gone differently. We're speculating, but I'm going to go on the record and put my money down on the fact that we probably wouldn't have had the Clone Wars had that happen.
Yeah, it's hard to think how we would have still landed there, although I'm sure there are political scientists or military strategists who could, make us a flowchart and show us how we could still land there. But
wheels within wheels.
It's such a different ideology and approach to governance that it seems like it would take a much longer road to get to a point like that.
The Military Creation Act that created the Clone Army probably wouldn't have made it to the floor the way it did.
Yeah. So, a decade later, Alderaan senator at this point, Bail Organa, who was Viceroy of Alderaan and Prince Consort to Queen Breha Organa, and among his other senatorial duties, he served on the Loyalist Committee that had been assembled by Chancellor Palpatine. And this was a body assembled to help protect the Chancellor politically from the Confederacy of Independent Systems. You may know it by its more colloquially common name of the Separatists, which threatened to fracture the Republic irreparably when it declared independence from the Galactic Republic. And it did so after the Naboo crisis, which could and likely will, and I think almost definitely will, be an episode all on its own.
So Organa spoke out in the Senate against the Military Creation Act that we talked about, and against the Galactic Republic going to war during the conflict with the Separatists, though of course the war happened anyway. During the Clone Wars, in line with its tradition of peace and assisting those in need, Alderaan was home to a political conference focused on the issue of the large number of refugees created by the conflict and how aid might be provided to them.
And that event actually ended up being quite dangerous, in particular for Senator Padme Amidala, as there was an attempt planned on her life that was going to be put in motion while she was attending as a keynote speaker. And thankfully, Jedi Padawan Ahsoka Tano had a premonition about this threat, and she traveled to Alderaan and was able to thwart this assassination. And it was discovered eventually that the crime lord Zero the Hutt was responsible ultimately for the treachery, having hired the bounty hunter Aura Singh to get rid of Senator Amidala.
It was certainly a tragic. It could have turned tragic. More tragic than events ended up happening much later. But it could have been bad news if that would have played out. Bail Organa consistently upheld the ideals of his homeworld in searching for peaceful resolutions to galactic conflict. In his role as senator, he was ever mindful of the principles on which the Republic had been founded, and worked tirelessly to both serve and defend them. While this approach is certainly noble and was admired by some, to many of the more jaded senators of the galactic governing body, it made Bail Organa seem naive and foolish.
Yeah, he was kind of brushed off by a lot of people as an idealist, which is a pity. And as Chancellor Palpatine managed to gradually take on more and more power, Senator Organa was strongly opposed to it. He saw this as a clear violation of the ideologies of democracy. And along with other members of the Senate who shared his concerns, he began brainstorming resistance tactics that could be enacted in the event that Palpatine crossed the line in terms of a power grab.
That might be putting it mildly.
Well, that was in case. They didn't even know what was coming.
Yeah. As the Republic that Bail Organa had once known shook apart and morphed into an empire, with Sheev Palpatine naming himself emperor, fulfilling the greatest fears of Bail Organa and others like him, the senator opted to do what he could to help the remaining fragments of the Republic. He ran directly toward potential danger by making his way to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, where he worked alongside Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda to try to assist any remaining members of the Jedi Order.
Then, when his friend and ally, Senator Amidala, died tragically after giving birth to twins, exactly as the collapse of the Republic was at a fever pitch, Organa adopted one of the babies, and along with his wife, Queen Breha Organa, raised her as a true Princess of Alderaan. And of course, as everyone pretty much knows at this point, that was Princess Leia.
As he raised his daughter in the early years of the Galactic Empire, Bail Organa also nurtured a different kind of legacy, the Alliance to Restore the Republic, known in shorthand parlance as the Rebellion. Though Alderaan opposed the dictatorial government of Emperor Palpatine, it remained part of the Empire, while quietly working in opposition to it. Alderaan's regular assistance to worlds in crisis offered ample opportunities to assist the rebellion. Missions were simply folded into the regular aid shipments and efforts that the benevolent planet often sent to war-torn areas.
While the initial efforts at seeding and developing this rebellion came in the form of scattered cells, with a great deal of assistance and leadership coming from Bail Organa himself, the movement eventually coalesced into the organized military resistance group that most people are now familiar with.
For Princess Leia Organa's part, it's no surprise that she ended up, as has been documented at length, as a leader within the rebellion, even at a young age. Her father instilled in her the same values that guided his actions throughout his life as a government servant. He taught her that all of the wonderful things about Alderaan, all of the cultural achievements that had been part of it, being called the the planet of beauty were to be shared freely with everyone.
And so, too, even from a very young age, she was instrumental in growing and strengthening the rebel forces. At one point, when a rebel cell that was codenamed Phoenix, based on Lethal, needed assistance, Bail sent his daughter to assist in a matter of delivering assets to the fledgling group. And this is an important indicator of the level of Bail Organa's commitment to his ideals. So I'm not a parent, but I do know that it is fairly common for most parents to do whatever they can to keep their kids safe and out of trouble. But Bail was willing to give his daughter both the guidance and the freedom to become an ally in the rebellion, and he sent her on missions in that effort that were inherently dangerous. And that is how much he believed in what the rebels were fighting for.
Well, and given Leia's given Leia's mother and how he knew her, maybe it was easier to just let her go like that because he knew it was in her blood to do it anyway. So you can't really rebel if you're being encouraged. They were rebelling enough, right? So on that mission to Lothal, the Organas were sending 3 cruisers to the Phoenix Cell, knowing that the planet was being monitored by the Empire due to suspicion of insurgent activity. Princess Leia traveled with the cruisers to sell the guys that Alderaan was delivering relief supplies carried by the cruisers. The ruse worked, and Leia was granted permission to land.
This was all part of a bigger plan, of course. So to protect the false justification for arriving with several ships, and to maintain Alderaan's cover so that it might continue to serve the rebellion on the sly, the plan was that a theft of the princess's ships by rebels would be staged. But the Empire, in its own effort to thwart the rebels, had enacted heightened security protocols to prevent just such thefts. So through a series of disguises and some quick planning on the part of members of the cell, the plan was eventually carried out, but just barely.
At one point during the mission, Leia even had to order one of the rebels to shoot her with a weapon set on stun to continue this elaborate dance of deception. While she was not seriously harmed and the trickery worked, it's just one example of the royal house of Alderaan, and specifically its famed princess, showing compassion, grit, and dedication to the fight against Imperial forces.
Later, of course, Bail Organa sent his daughter on a mission to deliver the Death Star plans to the rebellion, and it would be the last such mission he would give her, as her ship was captured, as everyone knows, by Darth Vader, setting in motion a chain of events that led to the Death Star's weapon being tested on the placid planet of Alderaan.
Considering the devotion of Alderaan's leadership to high ideals of governance and peace, it's really no surprise that the planet was, in many ways, a keystone in the development of the Rebel Alliance. And even though the planet itself was already gone before it was founded, the New Republic.
And so we're going to talk a little bit now, kind of as a wrap-up of Alderaan's end and what happened immediately thereafter, and even a little bit down the road from that. So as we mentioned at the top of the episode, and it is super common knowledge, the planet Alderaan was taken out by the super battle station designed by the Empire at the command of Grand Moff Tarkin. And while Alderaan was, of course, completely peaceful, the Empire had long suspected that it was sympathetic to the rebellion, which was, of course, correct. So despite being entirely unarmed, that entire population paid for the sympathy and assistance that Alderaan had offered the rebellion with their lives.
What's often forgotten here is that there were efforts to preserve as much of the remnants of Alderaan society as possible. The fragments of the population who survived by virtue of simply being elsewhere at the time the Death Star's laser hit their home were small in number, but still important as the only tie to the planet's history.
And despite the fact that she had a heavy bounty on her head and that high-ranking rebel officers wanted her to take time off from the fight to grieve, Princess Leia actually left Yavin 4 shortly after the rebellion's ceremony celebrating the destruction of the Death Star. After speaking with pilot Yvonne Verlaine and learning that the Empire was tracking down surviving Alderaanians, Leia decided that she would take on the job of finding them first so that she might find a way to protect them.
And it might be important to point out, too, that pilot Yvonne Verlaine was also Alderaanian.
Yeah, which initially their relationship was a little bit tenuous because Leia never really enjoyed all of the pomp and circumstance of being royalty, whereas Yvonne really was attached to it.
Yeah. No, it was certainly an interesting dynamic to read about. So one of the first stops was Naboo, and the Empire immediately started looking for surviving Alderaanians as well, and the Melodic Order was on their list. Fortunately, Leia made it to them first. She then traveled to additional worlds to unite all known living Alderaanians.
Later, after the rebellion had defeated the Empire and the New Republic was in its infancy, the scattered citizens of Alderaan who had been off-world during that destruction banded together to try to figure out what was going to happen to their people next. Princess Leia gave the stragglers assistance in the form of ships and supplies to assist in rebuilding the culture as they attempted to find, quite literally, their place in the galaxy.
One of the elements of aid rendered was the delivery of massive amounts of scrap. Now, this material came from an unlikely and somewhat ironic source. It was what remained of the Death Star. And this scrap offered the remaining Alderaanians the option to build their own space station as a way to make a new home, if they opted not to pursue relocating to another planet as refugees. There's an ongoing excavation and historical research into what became of that scrap, so there will probably be additional info on that in the not-too-distant future.
I love a little developing historical action. And perhaps the culture of Alderaan is best summed up in the words of Princess Leia, that she once spoke to the fleet of Alderaanian refugees when they were about to enter a fight with an Imperial Star Destroyer, not long after they had lost their planet. And she said, quote, "We are not our enemy. We are Alderaan. We answer rage with wisdom. We answer fear with imagination. We answer war with hope."
Yeah, that's about the best way to sum it up, I think. That really kind of pulls every facet of their culture together.
Well, it would make sense that a princess of Alderaan would have that fabulous phraseology in her pocket.
Yeah. Well, her elegantly designed pocket on her flowing robes.
Yeah, I mean, that was the kind of stuff that was really instilled in her from day one by her father, so it makes sense. So yeah, that's the unfortunate loss of an amazing culture.
Since the show is still so new, we still don't have any listener mail.
We can make some up.
We can make some up. Do you have any? Do you have any, Holly?
No.
We probably should tell people how they could get it to us as well, because I think last time we said, hey, send us listener mail, and we didn't give anyone an email address. But I thought
we were just using telepathy. I don't know.
That doesn't work. Neither of us are Jedi.
I like how you speak for both of us, but that's fine.
Unless you're a secret Jedi.
Not even a little. Not even a little. Tell them how they can reach us, though.
You can reach me at using my email address, brian@bigshinyrobot.com. And if you want, Holly, you can give your email address as well, or they could just send it all to me and I could forward it to you.
They should send it all to you. My email address is already too lumpy.
Okay. We can do that. So send your messages about shows to me, and we will see you next time. I don't know. Is there any other better way to...
They can also reach out to us on Facebook.
They can.
Do you have our Facebook address handy?
Our Facebook address is facebook.com/faux history. And our Twitter account is Fauthentics.
Yeah, so you can always ping us in those places as well. I hope nobody thinks I'm punking out by going, don't email me, but seriously, it will get lost. My email inbox is a train wreck, so I don't want you to write in vain and have it be lost in the ephemera of my poorly organized digital universe.
And I will make sure I get it to Holly, so I'm probably the best person there.
Yeah.
So
you're the good one. We all know. It's fine.
I didn't say that.
I did. I'm saying it with it's that speech impediment where I sound sarcastic when I'm being very, very sincere.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for another episode of the show.
Yeah. So we hope to see you again at Authentic History.